It was late, close to midnight on April 19th, 1958. The kind of night where everything feels quieter than usual. A young man named Frank drove along a narrow coastal road, his headlights cutting through the darkness ahead. On his right, somewhere beyond the edge of the road, waves crashed against the cliffs below. But he couldn't see any of it. There were no streetlights, no moonlight strong enough to guide him. Just darkness and the sound of the ocean. The road he was on followed the edge of a steep drop, a place known for its beautiful views during the day. But at night, it felt different, empty, unforgiving. Inside the truck, it was silent. Frank glanced over at his two friends. Both of them were half asleep, their heads leaning against the windows. They had spent the entire day at the beach, driving, walking, swimming. Now, exhaustion had finally caught up with them, and Frank wasn't much better. His eyes felt heavy, his thoughts drifting in and out, fighting to stay focused on the road. All he wanted was to get home. Waiting for him there was his wife, pregnant, alone, probably still awake. That thought pushed him forward. He pressed the gas just a little harder. The engine responded. The truck moved faster. The road stretched endlessly ahead. Dark, quiet, empty. Too empty. For a moment, everything felt calm. Too calm. And then, the road shifted. A curve. Sharp. Sudden. Frank didn't see it in time. His foot slammed on the brakes. The tires screamed. The truck began to slide. And in that instant, everything changed. The moment Frank hit the brakes, he knew it wasn't enough. The truck was already moving too fast. The tires screeched against the pavement, struggling to find grip, but the road offered nothing. It was too late. The curve came faster than expected. Too sharp. Too sudden. Frank yanked the steering wheel, trying to force the truck back into control. But instead, it made things worse. The back end swung out. The truck spun. Inside the cab, everything turned into chaos. His friends jolted awake, disoriented, confused. What's happening? But there was no time to answer. The headlights swung wildly, flashing across the road, then the edge, then nothing. Just darkness. For a split second, everything slowed down. Frank's hands tightened around the wheel. His heart slammed against his chest. And then he saw it. The barrier. A thin metal guardrail between them. And the drop. The truck slammed into it. A loud crash exploded through the night. For a moment, it held. Just for a moment. Then it gave way. The metal snapped. And suddenly, there was nothing beneath them. The truck lurched forward into empty space. Weightless. All three of them screamed. Frank squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for impact. He expected water. Cold, violent, final. He imagined the ocean rushing in, filling the truck, dragging them down. No escape. No chance. Just darkness and silence. But then, instead of water, they hit something solid. Hard. The truck slammed down with a violent impact. Everything shook. Metal groaned. Glass rattled. And then, it stopped. No water. No sinking. Just silence. Frank opened his eyes, breathing hard. Confused. They were still alive. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The truck was still. The engine silent. Only the sound of waves crashing somewhere below filled the darkness. Frank blinked, trying to understand what had just happened. He moved his hands, his legs. No pain. He turned to his friends. They were shaken, breathing hard, but alive. "Are you guys okay?" he asked. Yeah, I think so." No broken bones. No serious injuries. It didn't make sense. They had just gone off a cliff. Frank slowly reached for the door handle, but before he could open it, one of his friends pushed open the passenger door and carefully stepped outside. There was a pause. Then his friend's voice came back, low, disbelieving. "Guys, we're not in the water." Frank frowned. "What do you mean?" We landed on something. A ledge. Narrow, rocky, hidden in the darkness. Somehow, instead of falling all the way down into the ocean, the truck had dropped only part of the way and gotten caught. A miracle. That was the only word for it. Frank let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Then he laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was unbelievable. They should have died, but they didn't. One by one, his friends stepped fully out onto the ledge, carefully testing their footing. The ground felt stable, solid enough. They stood there, looking out into the darkness, realizing just how close they had come. Above them, the road was only about 20 feet up, close enough. All they had to do was climb or call for help. They were going to be fine. Frank shook his head, still in disbelief. Then he decided to climb out too, but his door was stuck. The impact had jammed it shut. So instead, he rolled down his window. Slowly, he pulled himself up, shifting his weight as he climbed halfway out of the truck. His friends turned to look at him. They could only see a silhouette in the dark. A shadow moving. Almost free. Almost safe. And then, Frank disappeared. Just gone. No sound. No warning. No scream. 1 second he was there. The next, he wasn't. For a moment, no one moved. "Frank?" One of them called out. Silence. "Frank, where are you?" No answer. Only the sound of the ocean, echoing in the darkness below. For a moment, his friends didn't move. Their eyes locked on the empty space where Frank had just been. It didn't make sense. People don't just disappear. "Frank?" One of them called again, louder this time. Still nothing. A cold feeling crept in. Slowly, carefully, they stepped around the truck toward the driver's side. Each step felt heavier, more uncertain. And then, they saw it. A hole, right next to the truck, blending almost perfectly into the darkness. Easy to miss. Impossible to see at night. It wasn't just a crack or a dip in the ground. It was deep. Too deep. One of them crouched down, peering into it. "Frank?" His voice echoed, swallowed by the darkness below. There was no response. What they didn't know, what Frank couldn't have seen, was that this ledge that had saved their lives wasn't solid. Not completely. Beneath the surface, hidden in the rock, was the entrance to an underwater cave. When Frank climbed out of the truck, he didn't step onto safe ground. He stepped into that hole and fell down into darkness. Inside the cave, Frank was alive. At first. He hit the bottom hard, disoriented, struggling to understand where he was. It was pitch black. The air was damp. The sound of dripping water echoed around him. He called out. No answer. Above him, somewhere, his friends were shouting his name. But down here, their voices barely reached him. Frank stood up, panicking now. He began moving, feeling along the walls, searching for a way out. But the cave twisted. Narrow passages. Sharp turns. Nothing familiar. Nothing clear. And then, the tide began to rise. Slow at first. Cold water creeping along the ground, filling the space. Frank tried to move faster, tried to find higher ground, an exit, anything, but he was already lost. And by the time the water reached his chest, there was nowhere left to go. Above, His friends could do nothing but wait for help. But by the time rescuers arrived, and the tide had fully come in, Frank was gone. He had survived the fall, survived the crash, survived what should have killed him, only to die in the one place no one could see, right beside safety,